An essential conversation about glyphosate, toxins, and our environment.
Hello, Essential Therapy followers. Dr. Cindy Hodgson here. I'm a physical therapist, exercise physiologist, owner of Essential Therapies. And we've been talking this month about detoxing, as it's Detox December. And for me, it's been a big essential therapy to learn about this throughout my life. And I'm so excited to share with you with someone who is just, I'm going to use your word, Danny. I'm going to introduce Danny Kuzner, who is a soil geek. And what does a soil geek have to do with essential therapies and detoxing? And I'm so excited to share with you what that really means. And let me just kind of give a little bit of background. Danny and I had conversations about toxins and detoxing, and I think that's kind of how this all came up. But she has a very unique background, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that and why soil is important to her and how she and I kind of got to this point where we're doing this incredible interview that we've been talking about for, I think, weeks now, right, Danny?
Yeah.
Exciting. And actually you had, we were kind of thinking about this whole detox idea. I almost, for the last probably 7 or 8 years, I've done a detox in the first part of December as I'm getting ready for the holidays. And when I detox, it makes me less prone to eat, all those treats and things. And so I was already planning on talking about that. And then you came up with the idea, what about a theme for December of being Detox December? So it all worked out great. And now here we are. So tell us a little bit about you, how you got to this place, what your background is, and what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I've been working in agriculture for about 15 years. I graduated with a sustainability degree, and so I was very, very general, caring about, all the systems, where our food comes from, how our resources are used, what's happening in the environment. And after I graduated, got into working with community gardens and urban agriculture. That's kind of where I began. And grew from there in terms of just wanting to grow better, more nutrient dense food. So I'd gone out to the Rodale Institute, which is in Pennsylvania. And at that time, they had a soil biologist there, Elaine Ingham. And that's where I fell in love with the soil microbiome and the power of the soil, really to regenerate not only itself, but then all systems, because our food comes from the soil. So I took that message and thought that farmers that are working on bigger tracts of land here in the Midwest, would be excited and want to understand how microbiology can really benefit their crops. And that was about 8 years ago now that I started working with larger grain farmers in terms of improving their systems. And it started off, with a lot of hope and inspiration on my part, but through time I learned, what is really happening in agriculture, how is our food really being grown, and that's where I learned more about the toxins and specifically one chemistry that we're going to talk about today. And so this has been a journey for me of just diving into the research, talking with different farmers, and having a lot of experience with a wide range of farmers in terms of their concerns and issues, and also the realities of what they face of how they grow our food, and then wanting to provide improvements and solutions to the system. So today I work with organic farmers and what some people call biological or regenerative farming, in terms of it's not certified organic, but they're trying to benefit their soil health.
Cool. Very cool. I love hearing you talk about the microbiome of the soil. And I think, thankfully, that's become a common word, I think, for most people, or at least I think it is, the microbiome that we know now about our own physiology in our bodies, right? But you don't really hear about microbiome of the soil. So this is just like a whole new world, I think, that is just starting. So it's where do we begin? So how do we even begin this discussion today?
Oh, I might want to start with a couple disclaimers for everybody, I guess, in terms of in terms of where we're headed, and I think the energy of what I want to bring to this. So this is about what we want to be for. So if we can just ground ourselves in that energy, we are for health, we are for vitality of life. And this is not about being against something, even though there's a lot of concern about toxins that may be out there. And so if we just remind ourselves of that, I think also wanting to remind any of the listeners that farmers aren't a target or an enemy here. They're really a part of the conversation, a part of the solution in terms of what new tools can we provide to their toolkit to help eliminate or minimize toxic exposure. And then for some of the medical things that we may touch on here, just disclaiming that I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical professional. Cindy has way more education and expertise than I do with those credentials, but I am a certified crop advisor. That's a title that's used in agriculture, a CCA. So I'm coming from the agronomy angle, but the connections between agriculture and human health are just really strong, and we need to have more emphasis on these connections. For everything that we talk about today and share today, there will be countering information out there in any personal searches that you guys do. So just knowing that there are big marketing conglomerates for these companies that are putting counter information to some of the research that I'm going to present today. And then I think along with groundedness, if we can just remember our power in this and our choice in this. So really wanting to stay positive and just have this be informational and educational to bring some of these issues to light.
Absolutely. And I, will bring into this, John Barnes, one of my mentors, right, is one of the big saying that he has said, and others have said it as well. And that is, without awareness, there is no choice. And so we are here to provide some knowledge to the listeners and some awareness. And then with that awareness, we have different choices that we can make. And so I guess that's the proactive piece of this, right? So if you have no idea that something's going on and you can't make an informed decision about how to behave around it. And so this is, clearly my part in this is about health and wellness. And my goal and my vision is to always help people find a better way to feel, and a better body, a better mind, a better spirit, all of those things. And what can we do every day, in even the little things and the big things, to help promote that? And if we have no idea what's going on and the proper choices that we can make, then we aren't making an informed choices. So with that, thank you so much for that disclaimer, because I love that whole idea. We are grounding in the power of all of us working together and coming up with some great solutions and choices around this whole topic. So without further ado, Danny, what do you have for us?
Awesome. So I'm gonna
do your screen share here.
Screen share. You can see that, Cindy?
Not yet. No. So is it? There we go. It's coming up now.
Awesome.
There we go. And I see both of us. All right.
Great. So I'm going to share some information today. We are talking about glyphosate as one chemistry that is a pesticide in agriculture. And we chose this one, or I chose this one, because it is the most widely used herbicide and pesticide ever in terms of sheer volume that we use in agriculture. This kind of came about with Cindy and my conversation originally, her just asking, well, is it safe to use, and can we use it in small amounts? And that kind of spurred the conversation of, how do I even go about talking about the enormity of what I know about this chemistry? And so this presentation is really a background on it and giving just that general awareness that you referred to just a little bit ago, Cindy. So glyphosate, it's the most active, it is the active ingredient in Roundup, and that chemical molecule there in the middle of this slide. Actually, can you see my pointer?
Yep, I can see it.
Awesome. So that's what it looks like. It's just a chemistry molecule, but it's been patented under the Roundup brand. And there are a couple different versions of Roundup out there. So they've made, I guess, different types of those labels over the years in terms of their branding and approach with glyphosate. It's the most widely used herbicide in the world, as well as in the US. And herbicide is something for those in ag, there will be basic definitions today, and you guys can learn a lot about agriculture terminology, but an herbicide is something that's used to kill a weed. And a pesticide is a broader category. So that would be the bigger overarching category. Herbicide would fall within pesticide.
Okay.
And a pesticide would be used to, a general definition is to kill anything that's really not wanted. So that might be a weed, so an insect, or even a disease would fall under pesticide. So pesticide would be the bigger category, and herbicide falling within that.
Can I ask a quick question there, Danny?
Yeah.
So is that, so the microbiome, so people understand, like we used that word earlier, a microbiome relating to different types of smaller organisms, those are also killed or considered as pests, right? When you consider
anything that's not wanted in the microbiome. So if there'd be like a pathogenic bacteria or a virus or a fungus, those would be a part of something that a pesticide could kill, like an insecticide or a fungicide.
Kind of like an antibiotic. And we're thinking of people, right? So sometimes, and most people I would hope now know that when you take an antibiotic, it's important to take probiotics, because we're killing not only the pests in our bodies or the bad guys, right? But we're also killing the good guys. Is that fair to say in this situation too?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And I'll touch on that a little bit later in terms of,
Great.
it's non-discriminatory in terms of what it's affecting in the environment.
Okay.
So on the left here, this might be how we think homeowners use, we go out, we get a small jug of Roundup, right? And we spray it on, we spot spray some weeds and dandelions in our yard. You can kind of see in the bottom picture there. I mean, that's showing the different,
Right.
these different labels, or just how it has different strengths. Monsanto, which was bought out by Bayer in 2016, that's who manufactures this chemistry. And so now it's Monsanto Bayer, as of that acquisition closed in June of 2018. So it's the largest crop science business in the world in terms of, controlling chemistries, because Roundup is just such a large percentage of the total volume of, crop chemistries that are sprayed out there. And so what you have on the photos on the right, that's really where more of the majority of Roundup is being used, and the glyphosate is being sprayed is on our agricultural crops. So there might be, situations where someone's using a backpack sprayer, or in more cases, the majority of the volume is going out in these spray rigs in terms of, tractors going through fields. And and that's really where we're at today. So I'll jump into this next graphic showing just the use rates. So we can see the difference, that even though there may be concern or questions from homeowners. That orange line at the bottom, that's such a small percentage. That's only about 21 million pounds that are used in home use, compared to, as you can see, you know, the agricultural line is just so much higher. That green line, and the purple line being the combination or the difference between the two. But the reason why, you know, of all the toxins I could have talked about, or we could have talked about in agriculture, I mean, we're choosing glyphosate because it is just the most used ever by sheer volume. And so that's what makes it really the most important for awareness of everybody, whether you live in a urban environment or a rural environment, that you may be closer to farmers, whether you know farmers or not. We're all being exposed to this chemical. So just some numbers. It topped the list in 2001 in terms of the most widely used, like for total volume. These numbers come from the EPA. So the EPA does track this and publish on pesticide use for its citizens. And in 2000, so since 2013, the average of that green line has been about 280 million pounds spread on 285 million acres, and that's an average of about 0.8 pounds per acre. Some estimates are that it's a little more than 0.8, but that's kind of a conservative estimate there. And like I'd already mentioned, you know, the orange line is only about 21 million pounds. So just it's there's not even a comparison here. Yeah. So the only other point on this, if folks who are watching want to watch later and copy this link at the top, the source of this graph is from a couple that actually have timelines on this website, Hygiea Analytics, and there are 3 of them that talk about the history of glyphosate, you know, kind of its patent, its legislative, registrative history, just certain landmarks in the development of this product. Its first patent was in 1974, so it's been around for a long time. But if folks are interested in learning more, that will be a great link there. And so we go all the way from 1974, we get to the year 1996. And this was when things really changed in terms of the volumes that are being used. So in the graph here, you know, 1996, we're about here, you know, we're under 50 million pounds, and it rises, and there's almost, you know, just this exponential curvature from that point on. And so people might be wondering, like, well, what the heck changed in 1996, right? And that was when the first genetically engineered, or you sometimes might see GMO crops were approved for use in agriculture. And so I think it's humbling to think about this year. In preparing this, it's like, where was I in 1996? I mean, I was 11 years old. I got through the first decade of my life without any exposure. Well, I shouldn't say without any, but with minimal exposure to this chemistry, right? So I think of all children born after 1996, they've lived in a world where, you know, they've just been exposed since birth. That includes my nieces and nephews. That even includes my twin sisters. I have sisters that are several years younger than me, and they were born in 1998. So thinking about their lives and how they've just been exposed and how that might have effects in their health moving forward. We in the Midwest here, in, you know, all the purple areas are the highest use areas with that graph on the left. So, you know, I guess explaining what some of the most popular genetically engineered or modified crops are, that would be cotton, soybeans, and corn. And so corn, we kind of grow corn in agriculture. They say that in the I states, so Iowa to Indiana.
Whoa.
We in Ohio and Michigan, we also grow corn, and there's more corn grown in Wisconsin and all parts of the Midwest, really. But the I states are the biggest producers.
Okay.
And then you got soybeans in that same region, and then cotton. Cotton is kind of that lower southern portion, so Missouri. This corner, I actually lived and worked for a time in this corner of what's called the Boot Heel in Missouri, that bottom part of the state of Missouri, and they grow a lot of cotton all the way down through the south there. So those being the biggest crops by sheer volume, and they're also the only other one I would add to the list is sugar beets. So pretty much all of the sugar beets, which are kind of grown in the upper Midwest, Minnesota, this Red River Valley, as well as the state of Michigan, grows a lot of sugar beets. Pretty much all of those are genetically modified. They don't make this list on the right, because their total acres are less. But yeah, with that, I mean, Cindy, where the heck were you in 1996?
I was finishing up PT school, believe it or not. So that seems like a long time. It was a long time ago, but I've always wondered this. I always wondered, when did the GMO thing come about? I mean, it's kind of one of those things that kind of snuck in there for us who aren't soil geeks, or caring about it so much. But this is very shocking to me to see these numbers. I mean, it's not that long. I was 24 years ago. I've been in PT for 24 years. And so to think that has all happened in that amount of time is kind of scary, because we're basically the experiment, aren't we? I mean, we, and here we are. So yeah, 96. Crazy.
Yeah. So some folks might need just a reminder or refresher if you don't know what a again, they'll say GE or GMO. So GE for genetically engineered, or GMO for genetically modified organism. There is a little bit of distinct difference in that definition, but for general purposes, we'll go with GMO here. And I mean, this graphic explains it, but pretty much what it's I guess describing is that the seed, so it's in the seed, it's been designed to withstand the spray of the glyphosate. So the seed is genetically changed in a certain way to be resistant to an herbicide or an insecticide. And so the largest crops that I previously mentioned, over 90% of each of these is GMO, which just means that we really can't get away from it. And corn and soybeans, I mean, for those that may not know just how much of these byproducts, it's not like we're not going out and eating field corn. That field corn is going into a feed for an animal, and that animal, it might end up in the chicken. It ends up in the feed, which then could end up in the animal or the animal's byproducts. So that's where most of the soybean and corn is growing. But then there's also soybean oil and corn oil, and just all of those oils that are used in ingredients in a lot of packaged and preserved foods. So somebody might think, oh, well, this doesn't affect me because I'm not just going out there and eating soybeans raw, and most of us aren't. So it's getting into the food supply in different ways. And then in that last, just the effect, right? So how does it work? That means that the farmer can spray the glyphosate over the top of the crop, and it will kill everything else, but it won't kill the corn or the soybeans or the cotton that are growing. So that's how I guess that's how that's what a GMO is, but then that's why the glyphosate is allowed to be sprayed, or why it's sprayed over GMO crops, so that it kills all the weeds but not the crop itself. So I kind of, I guess, organize the two areas of concern for glyphosate into two buckets. And the one being GMO, because they're being actually sprayed with the glyphosate because they're resistant to the glyphosate, versus this next bucket, which is crops that are sprayed as a desiccant. And so the definition of this process, to walk people through it, that photo on the bottom left, let's just say both of these are wheat. And if you kind of see some of the green in there, this means that the crop was still growing. And what they'll do, these are all non-GE or GMO crops because they're not resistant to the glyphosate. So that means the glyphosate will kill them just like it would kill a weed. And so what they'll do is they'll go out and they'll spray this crop with one of these rigs very close to harvest. The seed is pretty much, maybe almost matured. And what they're trying to do is kill the crop all at the same time so that they can have a timely harvest and harvest at the same time. So you think about nature, things aren't maturing at exactly the same time, right? So it takes a longer amount of time if we were to let this field mature naturally. And so sometimes when you're driving out in farm country, one day the field was green and the next one, maybe it's a little brown, or there were weeds out there and they're brown. That normally means that they had sprayed some sort of herbicide to kill it. So you can kind of see it's turning, it's turning, the red or yellowish color in the photo here. And it'll end up being an even, an even kill. And then this field would come in and they would harvest this grain. So,
wow. So wait a minute.
Yeah, it's a little.
Wait. So they're killing all this live, healthy, good wheat with this toxic chemical, and then they're harvesting it and putting it in our food.
Correct. So that's where the crop desiccation is very concerning because of how glyphosate moves. So glyphosate moves through translocation, meaning that it'll hit that foliage of the leaf tissue. It will then be transported through the phloem, through the fluid of the plant to these metabolic sinks. And in this case, when we're this close to harvest, the metabolic sink is the actual seed. So there's more of a concern of a higher concentration of that glyphosate getting in the wheat kernel or the seed head. Essentially, it's going to be harvested and used for food. It's just very concerning. There are certain countries where glyphosate is not labeled for crop desiccation. Unfortunately, in the U.S., it is allowed. So crops are being desiccated this way. I think where it's where it's overwhelming is just that we have these two buckets, right? So you could say, oh, well, just stay away from GMOs. But no, then you have to be concerned about the crops that may be sprayed and desiccated. And so these are the two buckets where it's really getting out into our food supply.
So I have to ask a question. Sorry. so there's the GMO thing, which I'm sure you'll put this all together. So maybe I'm premature in asking, but you can let me know. So if I buy a bag of corn chips for my children, which says it says non-GMO, here's my bag of corn chips. It doesn't say organic on it, but it says non-GMO. So I feel at least better about it, right? What you're saying is that could have been corn that went through this process, but they're non-GMO. Yes?
Correct. Yeah.
Wow. So really, you still have all of this chemical on the food. What happens if they call it, what about organic? And maybe you're going to go into this in a bit, but yeah. So,
so that's where we're going, is that right, organic is the only that is not, the use of these chemicals are prohibited by that certification process. But I think for the crop desiccation portion, just wanted to list for folks, I mean, the highest concentration that might get in the food supply. So on wheat, they'll do this on wheat and other oats like small grains, other small grains like oats or rye. They do it with chickpeas. So hummus, sadly, has a higher concentration of glyphosate. So get that organically if you can. They'll do this to like edible beans, some peas, some lentils, and some potatoes. And when I say these categories of food, right, I want people to be assured, like, yes, it's very scary. And I would say the safest way to go is to eat organic, but it doesn't mean that every farmer is doing this to every one of these crops, right? So, I mean, the other way that we can do, you know, be empowered and have choice is, you know your farmer. If you're able to get some of your food supply locally, or that's from a regional source that they don't spray, that's going to be better in the long run for your health and knowing where your food came from. So, one other fun fact. So it's just food for thought. All you world travelers out there, I've never been to Europe, but this is one instance where, people who are gluten intolerant in the US, they'll go to Europe and they'll eat like a pastry or pasta. They'll eat a pizza in Italy, and they won't be affected by it. And so there are certain questions of, well, is it really the gluten? Like, is it really the wheat that's causing the damage, or is it how the wheat is grown? If more of the wheat in the US is sprayed or desiccated right before harvest, but it's not allowed to be sprayed or desiccated in Europe, then the quality of that wheat is going to be different. And maybe, those people their bodies can tolerate it there. So these are all questions, really, really fascinating, right? Yeah. And I think it comes home just in the fact that, again, if you're not in agriculture and some of these concepts may be foreign, or it's just really hard to wrap your head around, it's like, hey, here's bottom line. If glyphosate use is increasing, then the concentrations or our exposure, the amount in the human body is increasing. And so this is a graph here, showing the rise in glyphosate in urine levels, and how there has been that increase since 1996. So at 1996 would be 93, somewhere in here. Mm-hmm. And just that as the glyphosate in the green bars has increased, the amounts that we're able to see in our urine is increased. This researcher, Charles Bembrook, Dr. Charles Bembrook, is doing a lot of this work, trying to pull together the measurements and make some of these connections. Some other studies that are doing good work out there, there's something called the Heartland study, and I'll give the link to that later. But that's following moms and their children in the Midwest and seeing, with exposure rates to glyphosate, how is that affecting mothers and their children in their health effects. They have found some glyphosate even in breast milk. And so that group is Moms Across America is kind of advocating for, is this really safe? Is it really getting into our, in our food supply, even all the way into our breast milk, right? When that's one of the most nutritious foods out there. And just for awareness with our government, the EPA stopped testing for glyphosate residues in 2016. They had tested certain foods up until that point. And some folks might remember, this was because it's a couple of years ago, but there were big headlines, right? Like, oh, glyphosate residues found in Cheerios. And it kind of made national headlines. And it was kind of after that point that the EPA stopped testing. And I guess there are independent labs out there today. There are certain areas where people could get tested for glyphosate, not very widespread, but just that some researchers and doctors are doing that work. I guess one more comment here is, and I will not get into it today because, disclaimer, medical disclaimer, we don't have time. And it's also pretty deep science, but a lot of the curves of chronic disease will follow this curve. So certain things like rises in autism, rises in Alzheimer's, all of these diseases connect back to chronic inflammation. So functional medicine doctors that are making these connections, they're saying it's a problem in the human body with inflammation. And why have all of these curves really kind of gone up since 1996? That's obviously correlational data. So, the counter argument that's going to be out there is, oh, that's correlation. That's not real science. But
yeah, it's not cause and effect.
At the same time, we have to ask the question, and we have to be just inquiring citizens, because this is of grave concern for our health and well-being. All right, Cindy, we're gonna take a break.
Soil microbiome, I like it.
We're gonna talk
oh my gosh,
something awesome.
Look at that! Looks like fascia there.
Yeah.
With the root system, I'm telling you, we are all connected through this sort of fascial network stuff going on. Love
for
it.
Sure. So, before I jump into a little bit more of the toxicity, and I just need to breathe, and maybe everybody needs to breathe. So we're taking a mental break to feel empowered, feel some hope. And, soil is really the basis for all life, right? So we have to take care of the soil in order to take care of ourselves, take care of our bodies. And what is really at play here? Soil is not just dirt. It's not just a non-living material. All of this system, the soil food web, as it's called here, all of these bacteria and fungi and insects are out there in the soil, and they're actually turning the system, making nutrients available, sequestering carbon, really just being a huge collaborative, effort of synchronicity that's keeping and sustaining life on this planet. So it's kind of this idea of, if we take care of our soils, we'll be taking care of ourselves. Oh, this is a fun quote, but it's said that 1 teaspoon of soil contains more living organisms than there are people on the earth. So if you think about just 1 teaspoon, how much power and life is in that 1 teaspoon if it outnumbers the number of people? And yeah, Cindy, to your point here, so the fascial, I had to include the mycorrhizal fungi because of how it looks so much like fascia. And in our MFR world, we can get geeked out on that. But this is really an interconnection communication network. So they're sharing nutrients, they're sharing information. They might even share warning signals of if a predator is coming. And this is how the plants talk to each other. And it's just beautiful, intricate detail there. So glyphosate will knock this system back because it's non-discriminatory, kind of like we talked about a little bit earlier, but just wanting to ground ourselves in the power of this system, as well as the power of the human microbiome. So, between microbes in the soil and microbes in our bodies, this is what's keeping us alive. This artist, I recently found him, this David Goodsell. What he does is he makes these pictures. This is based off of like high resolution imagery that he'll get from actual cells, and then he takes it and kind of color codes it, so the colors are like structures, so like structures within the cell. But this is what the inside of our cells look like, and it's just
beautiful. It's very cool,
bewildering compared to my grade school textbooks only showed like 1 or 2 or 3, maybe there was 1 mitochondria and 1 nucleus, and no, it's way more complex than that, right? And microbes are a part of this system. So on the right there, you see kind of that's the list of all these photos. I couldn't tell you which one's which. I think they're beautiful, and it's good to remember how we're connected and how much we rely on the microbes in our human body. So the number of microbial cells outnumbers human cells by 10 times. So there's 10 times more, microbes in our body than just human cells. And scientists estimate it could weigh as like the weight of those microbes could weigh as much as 5 pounds. So we could argue, is that not what's keeping us alive? Is all these microbes?
Yeah.
And that if we take care of the biology and nature, it will take care of us. That our health and vitality will be really strong. So grounding in hope of the soil microbiome and the human microbiome. I kind of broke down what I see as the 3 biggest risk factors for humans with glyphosate. I'll start with this graphic on the right. So this is more work by Charles Benbrook, but there's a question here, right, of what's the difference in the limits between Europe and the United States? Why is the US that much higher? And I'm not a scientist to be able to study this to say, hey, what's right or wrong, right? But just the fact that there's that sheer volume of difference should be, cause for question, right? Which one's right? What is the exposure limits that would be appropriate for our safety and health? And so, that's good to realize and keep top of mind. But then kind of the 3 areas where the glyphosate affects us, it's patented as an antibiotic. This was the most recent patent in 2003 that Monsanto put in. It was approved in 2010. So just knowing, like, that kind of blows my mind, right? Once somebody understands what an antibiotic is, like even when we put it in our bodies to control an infection, that can help us, right? It kills the bad bacteria as well as the good bacteria. And so if we're just spraying our fields with an antibiotic, well, that's killing the bacteria. It's affecting that soil microbiome. And so the fact that the soil microbiome is being knocked back with a glyphosate spray, we could, it's then also affecting the human microbiome because the bacteria isn't there, the fungi aren't there to do everything that they normally do to get those nutrients into the food crop. And so that's affecting our food supply. Mm-hmm. So then the second bucket, the story of glyphosate is just fascinating. And there are some, I don't know, fun or silly twists in it, you could say, but its first patent was as a metal chelator in 1964. And so this is a chemistry that they used to clean out pipes. It was so strong at holding on to metals that was one of its original uses before they patented it as an herbicide. And so if you know what chelator is, a chelator is something that holds on to something else in a chemistry bond in a very strong way and won't let it go. So it's actually the Greek word. This will help people. It's a claw. So if you just think of a claw and then a molecule, and it just holds onto it. So when we're spraying it on the fields, it will hold on to certain micronutrients in the soil. So and maybe I should have written out these names for you, but Zn is zinc, Mn is manganese, and Fe is iron. So those are certain micronutrient metals that glyphosate is proven to hold on to. And if they're being held in the soil, then they're not able to get more readily into the plant. And then again, that plant or that crop, those micronutrients which our human bodies need aren't able to get into the food. And so that poses a problem, right? We either have to spray more fertilizer, like, hey, let's put out some zinc fertilizer to make sure zinc gets in the crop, or the crop is just going to be less nutrient dense and not have the zinc in it.
Right. And let's just interject here too, that, these molecules are very important and life sustaining, right? Zinc is, used in neurotransmission and many other things and helping our immune system. Just to name a couple, magnesium is super important in many chemical reactions in the body. I mean, muscle contraction being just one. I mean, so many. Iron, obviously. Yeah.
Manganese, not magnesium though.
Oh,
Just
manganese. Okay,
so
manganese.
manganese is in reproductive health. So
Right.
all of your reproductive processes. Yeah.
All of those. And the iron, obviously, for oxygen transmission,
Yeah.
this goes on. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
then and again, this could be a whole nother webinar,
We'll have
but
to talk, right?
glyphosate has been labeled as a probable carcinogen by the World Health Organization, and Monsanto was taken to court in 2018. They were found guilty by the first. That was the first lawsuit was found guilty. There have been a few subsequent lawsuits since then, and as of June 2020, their Bayer now is in the settlement of trying to pay out thousands of these lawsuits, as well as kind of creating this fund that would pay for future cancer cases. And so again, if it's technically a probable carcinogen and these cases are being found, in court, that would be cause for concern of not wanting to use it. Really quick, I guess, just how it moves in the environment. Glyphosate moves by air, through drift, and then in water through runoff. So it's a water soluble chemistry. It moves with our water. And so it's not just, hey, it's sprayed on that soil and it stays there. It can go anywhere that the water goes. And that's really where there's most cause for concern. The EPA just here in November of this year, 2020, they released a new draft biological evaluation. And this was just really hard to find in the news a couple weeks ago, but it determined that 93% of the endangered species on the EPA's list were likely to be adversely affected by glyphosate, as well as 96% of the critical habitats on that list. And so they do these evaluations every 15 years. So somehow 15 years ago, those numbers weren't as high. They didn't find that level of adverse effect, but just recently in this last round, they're determining that, geez, this is really knocking back some of these threatened populations. So we have to be, if we're not concerned about our own health and our bodies, we should be concerned for the planet too, right?
Right.
And with all of this, I guess.
Yeah, I'm glad this is coming up because I'm getting heavy. I'm feeling heavy. I got my kitty here. Let me show Tommy. This will lighten it up for just a second. He came up here a little bit ago. Isn't he beautiful?
Oh, good.
All right. Stop. What are we to do?
Yeah. So we're moving to solutions here. I think the biggest thing to remind folks is just, we want to try to limit our exposure, and these chemistries, particularly glyphosate, are out there. So how can we best protect ourselves? I think we need to feel empowered, and hopefully some of these resources or solutions can help you guys. So in landscaping, if I'm going to limit use around my house or in my landscaping, what can I do? We could always go back, and just hand weed. I know this takes a lot of work, right? But lots of benefits of exercise as well. Mulching and
good opportunity. Let me just say, a good opportunity to practice your neutral spine and core. But I have to interject because this is one of the things that I was concerned about, right? So I live in the country, and that's still kind of new for me. I grew up in the city, so that was, most of my life. But my mom uses Roundup on her weeds, and this was one of the big conversations you and I had initially when we talked about this, right? Is this, my concern for her using this product. And I think this is a big one right here. Like, people want the easy route, and I'm all about, hand weeding is tough. I don't do it. I don't have time for that. But so yeah, listen up, everybody. Think of some other options here that you can use instead of these maybe not so great choices of toxins. So okay, go ahead. Hand weeding.
Yeah. So
there we go.
so mulching, right? That'll limit that just smothers the weeds and they won't germinate. It's also really great mulch. Mulch and any sort of wood material is great for our fungi and earthworms. So
I love that. I love that little earthworms in a heart there. That's great.
Feed the soil life. I'm not actually a huge fan of the biodegradable, weed, or not biodegradable, the plastic weed barriers, but there are more like biodegradable options these days. And it's not the picture of the dandelion, but planting intentional planting, such as native gardens, pollinator gardens. Basically the idea, if there's some area that weeds are growing and we're trying to get rid of the weeds, we can smother them out. We can lay cardboard or that, landscape fabric on them, something to not let them germinate, but then either plant something that you want to be there, or, have a practice like mulch or mowing that's going to control them more easily. And the last resort, and maybe not the last resort, it could be a first resort, but this is some homemade weed killer that actually have brewed up. And my recipe is just water, salt, and dish soap, along with vinegar. There are lots of recipes online. You would want to use this in, it's going to be a small quantity, like a spot spray. So if you had an old spray bottle from some other thing you had in your house and wanted to fill it up with your own weed killer, you can just spot spray some weeds. I used this on poison ivy around my property last summer, and it worked pretty well. And the weeds, so the picture of the dandelions, like dandelions are a superfood. I don't know if people know
that's
that.
what I was going to say. I was hoping you were going to say that. I mean,
yeah,
people, you buy them in the grocery store when you're juicing, I mean, it's you go out in your yard if you have a nice organic area, right?
right. Well, and just, I mean, I would choose one of these, less toxic solutions over probable carcinogen, even if it required a little bit more work or ingenuity to try to figure out how to make it work for you, right?
Right.
So lots of options there. This idea then, okay, that can be home use. Okay, how do I avoid exposure based on the sheer number, volume of tons that were being used in agriculture? And so we just have to try to limit it in our food supply as much as we can. This is by no means like a 100% foolproof solution. This is really kind of a bouncing ball, but these are chasing a bouncing ball, but these are some suggestions. As we mentioned earlier, if you eat organic, that's the only certified label that would mean that the crop was grown without pesticides or herbicides. And if you can't eat organic, trying to cut out foods that are high in glyphosate residues. So if we go all the way back to the beginning and kind of remember the two buckets, the GMO food. So if you're not buying organic and it's like a corn, soy, canola, or sugar beets, maybe we want to avoid those because they're likely GMO and have been sprayed. But then to your question, Cindy, about the corn chips, right? The non-GMO crops that you see this label, the non-GMO verified, and that doesn't mean that it hasn't, been sprayed with a glyphosate or a pesticide. And I would put wheat as the biggest one in that bucket of concern for a non-GMO crop. And then sweating. So because it's water soluble, we get it out of our human bodies through either urination or sweating. So as a way to detox, exercising and or saunas. I've had some farmer friends that had really high pesticide exposure, and they would sweat in the sauna and it would smell like the ag chemicals that they sprayed on their fields. Wow. Because it was coming out in their sweat. And so just doing other best practice detox practices. I had a quote here. So Chris Kresser, I follow him. He's the author of Unconventional Medicine, and he's a strong voice in functional medicine. And he says, we have a sick care system, not a healthcare system, and that most healthcare is self-care. And I thought you would love that, Cindy, that quote. So this means that, how self-care, just by the simple act of what we're eating, what we're putting in our bodies, that means that we're working in that preventative realm, and being our own healthcare based on what we eat. If you can't eat organic, try to eat as much real food as possible. Cut out sugar and seed oils. That's always a good rule of thumb. So
I love that quote there. You gonna mention that Hippocrates quote?
Yeah. So Hippocrates is considered one of the fathers of medicine all the way back here. I don't even know these dates, right? Really long time ago. And he said this about this quote: "A physician should know something about the soil where a patient's food comes from." There's also the Hippocratic oath. That's a practice that medical doctors take before, I don't know, their final certification or graduation, whatever that looks like. And in that oath, it's do no harm as a part of the Hippocratic oath. And so I think one of the areas in medicine, I mean, if we're being our own advocates as being empowered over our own health, is, hey, let's do no harm within our own bodies. Let's know something about where our food comes from, and that'll go a long way in helping us heal ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm going to conclude with some resources here. These three are really excellent organizations, I would call them. So Moms Across America, Non-Toxic Communities, and the Heartland Study. The Moms Across America and Non-Toxic Communities are kind of advocacy groups that have done a great job of condensing information in one place. They have wonderful websites. These are just a couple pages that I pulled from. That there's a lot more data and research studies out there. Please don't trust me. Go out and research for yourself. Make informed decisions for you and your loved ones based on your comfort level and what you think of the situation. And then the Heartland Study, I think I mentioned it earlier, but that is an ongoing study currently in the Midwest, trying to look at the exposure of mothers and children to glyphosate. Mm-hmm. And then three people that have kind of been leading voices for me and are excellent advocates and have great resources. Dr. Zach Bush, this is his website here, and he's very outspoken on glyphosate. There's a lot of YouTube videos, various podcasts. If you have a chance to download something where Zach's been interviewed, you'll learn a lot in about an hour or shorter, maybe in the first 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. But he's doing a lot to advocate the connections between those chronic disease curves and glyphosate use. And he even has a few organizations that are then connecting to farmers and helping teach farmers how to farm in more regenerative, less toxic ways. Carrie Gillum, she's done a lot of the nitty gritty work following the story of Monsanto and some of the, steps along their path that have been used for cover up and is this chemistry actually safe or not? And so I'd recommend both of these books. The Monsanto paper is actually going to get released in 2021, but Whitewash is already out. And then Dr. Don Huber. Oh, I love this guy. I couldn't find a photo. I see him at the trade shows every year, and this is the first year that there aren't ag trade shows that I go to. But a couple of years ago, I got a photo with him, and I couldn't find it. I can't, this is the problem with technology, right? We take photos, and then where do they go? Right. But yeah, he's been around probably the longest out of these three. He's a professor emeritus. He was with Purdue, and he has more than 50 years of research in plant pathology. So the epidemiology of disease in plants, and basically how, a lot of very intricate work of how do things flow and move within the plant pathology, right? Knows way more than I do, but he was one of the first whistleblowers in terms of being outspoken about glyphosate from like a university perspective, working at Purdue, which is a state ag school. And he's made connections with livestock health and human health, and how the glyphosate is negatively impacting. So he has a lot of good stuff out there. And I'll just conclude with this one quote from him. It kind of goes in line with the precautionary principle, and just, if we don't have all the science and maybe we don't know really where it's going, I mean, should we at least not act out of caution? And so he says, when future historians write about our time and about our use of glyphosate Roundup, they're going to write about our willingness to sacrifice our children and jeopardize the very basis of our existence and the sustainability of agriculture. And so it really is just, a warning of, can we act out of more caution? Can we make different choices and get this education and awareness out there to feel more empowered? And with that, Cindy, I don't know how you want to wrap up, but that's all I had prepared. So
wow. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing. I think, even though, I've been aware of some of these things, but not, been able to really dive in to this. And I know even this is just a cursory kind of awareness that you've beautifully put together. I just thank you so much for the time that you've put on this. I mean, I know that this is kind of, your baby and your field and all of that, but still, I know putting all this stuff together is, very, it's time consuming. It's extremely important. And I'm sure very rewarding for you too, but I'm so grateful for it. And not just for opening my own eyes here, but, let's just talk a minute about this whole detox idea. And so, okay, so here's this problem, okay, that kind of, maybe you knew about, maybe you kind of knew it was there in the background, but, didn't really know the implications. Well, here's the deal. We don't know what this is doing to us, right? I mean, there's some strong evidence here and some common sense, factors too, that this is a problem. So how do we minimize our exposure to this stuff? And so the whole organic thing, all of that stuff that you presented, I think is super important. But, also, how do we deal with what we've already done, right? And what we can't really undo. I mean, this stuff is flying around in the air, like you said. It's in the water. It's probably way more places than we realize. Well, and I'm not even sure that we even know if we can detox it out of our bodies, but that's encouraging the whole sauna thing, right? I mean, I think that's because it's water soluble. This is great. So I would think that, we've been talking about detoxing and building up toxins in the body. There are ways to get toxins out of your body. The sauna, like you said, the skin is like our biggest detox tool too. I mean, things come out through our skin, dietary, our digestive system. Who knows what our own microbiome is doing for our own detoxing abilities, right? I mean, I'm sure some of that information is out there, but a lot of it we don't know yet. I mean, it was just in the last few years that, I followed a lot of this research too about the microbiome and the Human Microbiome or Human Genome Project. And now it's the Microbiome Project, and, books like Eat Dirt and those types of things are coming out there, and listening to these researchers. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. And it's fringe, right? It's fringe. I say that because medicine isn't direct, traditional medicine isn't talking about all that stuff. I heard somewhere this year that it takes like 16 to 18 years for this new research to filter into the education process of medicine. So this is definitely an area where you have to advocate for yourself. You have to find, I mean, now we have this, it's the information age, right? Education you can find online. You can find sources that are good and sources that are not so good. So certainly, check out the sources, but something to be said about, purifying our bodies and whatever way we can, and watching what we're putting into them. And on occasion, detoxing what's in there, because it might be something that we put in, maybe something we didn't necessarily mean to put in, So I'm brought to mind a functional medicine nutritionist who wrote a book 5 years ago, The Elimination Diet. And there are other books called Elimination Diet and Resources, but Tom Malterre is a functional medicine nutritionist, and I loved his book because he goes very clearly into, finding the sources of disease in the body that are, individual. And so some people may have a toxic effect to, let's say, carpeting, okay, the outgassing from carpeting or other products that are in our environment, and it's showing up in a medical problem that traditional medicine can't find. So, if you have a problem that's maybe as a result of, like you mentioned, the inflammation, right? It's epidemic, this over inflammation that people are having and talking about these days. Well, where's it coming from? And probably from so many sources we can't even begin to imagine. But with Tom Meltier, his whole resource is, look, we need to minimize our exposure. We don't even know what's out there and what's affecting us fully, so if there's something that we do know about, minimize your exposure to it as much as possible. Maybe you can't eliminate something completely because you don't have control over that. I mean, if you live next to a field, which I do, I don't have control over what they're putting on that field, right? But I certainly can learn about what I can do for my body as far as cleansing out the impurities that are being built up, especially if down the road that's going to cause a disease in my body, right? Or my kids or some other loved one. I mean, it's so important that we learn these things, and it's scary in a way. And I don't want to get stuck on the fear piece of it, to be able to say, okay, this is the issues. How do we not get, into a state of fear, but we then turn that fear just into being informed, and to have a healthy concern for what's going on, because it affects us and it affects how our life is going to be, maybe tomorrow, maybe next year, maybe 10 years from now. And, what can we do to minimize the dangerous and effects that we don't want. I guess I'm kind of rambling here, but I just want to encourage people to educate yourselves. These are real toxins we're talking about here. What can you do in your body for your body to be able to minimize them? And, like you mentioned, Danny, like just the idea of making your own spray, for your plants, right? I mean, that's one thing. And some people might be, oh, that's a pain to do that, or, oh, it doesn't work as well. Well, yeah, it doesn't work as well for a reason, but it's certainly much, much healthier. And that's just one example of what you gave. I'm kind of overwhelmed with, what do we do now other than, I'm certainly going to be looking at, I've always been someone to look at labels, but to look at them even differently now. Thankfully, organic food is more accessible now than it was since 1996, right? That was the key year. But I did see on that one graph where it kind of leveled off. There was something that leveled off around like 2018, like in the last few years. And I thought, well, that might be because organic food is much more accessible now than it was in 2015, let's say. Don't you think?
Yeah, organic food is definitely increasing availability. And there have even been some, different metrics of like majority of consumers are at least buying a certain amount organic, even if you're not able to buy everything organic. So that could be another strategy is, maybe on those GMO crops or on those desiccated crops, just buy those organically,
Right.
rather than everything. And that's where some of these resources that I shared, might be helpful as people are digging into things too. It definitely can be overwhelming in terms of the rabbit hole to go down and how far to go down it. But I think I try to remind myself, or every food dollar that we spend is a vote of choice of what kind of world we want to live in, what we want to create for our children, for future generations even. And so just getting back to that awareness, and our power is in how we spend our money and time, and everybody has to eat, right? So even though you might not be able to eat organically, or if that's cost prohibitive for you, there's still active things that you can do. So.
And certainly, and maybe that's something that I look at, to provide other resources for our followers and for anyone interested, is just And I think this is an area of future, I don't know if concern is the right word, but promotion for people to look forward to, and that is detoxing. Getting these chemicals and these molecules out of our bodies so that our body can function better. And it's all part of self-care, like you said early on. The body that we end up with, a year from now, 2 weeks from now, 10 years from now, is the body that is a result of the choices that we're making right now.
Yeah.
That's something that I remind myself about every day. And I think that sounds so simple and basic, but it's not necessarily always thought of.
Right. And that it's even quicker than that. So our gut lining is every 5 to 7 days. So even if you just cut something out for 5 or 7 days, your body has already then been able to replace it or rebuild with a different structure. And that, that should be so empowering, right? I mean, we might not be able to tackle everything, but we can change our gut lining in 7 days, feed the microbiology, feed the good bugs that are in our body, try to take care of the soil. There are lots of little things we can do. And Cindy, if you want to do a follow-up of, we could have there be a more empowering or positive, proactive talk. Because I know I kind of got cut short there at the end and I went through some of those last slides quickly, but we can definitely drive those points home.
Yeah. Well, I love that, the 7 days thing is so true. I see that in my own detoxing, and probably something I should share another method with everyone is that, I've experienced a lot of inflammation in my body at different times, and then done a cleanse. And just recently, this cleanse that I started at the beginning of the month, the detox, whatever, I felt an amazing difference in my body in a few days, and like astounding difference in 9 days. And 9 to 10 days always seems to be that amazing cutoff for me, where I feel like a completely different person. And this is someone, I eat pretty clean for the most part, but I like to have my treats and different things now and then. But when my body starts to talk to me like, hey, it's time, I'm listening now. And when I take that step and cleanse and eliminate, like the elimination diet type stuff like Time Altair talked about, and it's different. I know my body pretty well, so I've been able to refine it that's specific and good for me. It's amazing how I feel so much more energy, and I don't have that foggy head, and I feel like I can accomplish so much, and I have a very busy life and a busy schedule and so many things that I love and I'm involved in and I want to contribute to. So I have to stay on it, I have to be able to find ways to help myself and to stick to those choices. So that's what I'm hoping to inspire in other people like yourself, Danny, and just really appreciate your thoughts today. And I think it might be a good plan to do some follow-up. We'll see how people respond to this, and see if anybody has any questions that we can attend to. And I will put those links in the YouTube link here so that people can look those things up as well. So
awesome.
Thank you so much for your expertise and your education in all of this. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Okay, we'll talk again soon.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for watching. Consider hitting the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share this video if you think of